Hello everyone, this is Frank Demos, making a video for Chapter 9. As we begin Unit 2, we will look through the timeline and look at different styles. So we'll be moving from the timeline from ancient times to modern times, looking at different stylistic tendencies throughout the timeline. So just a quick note, before about 10,000 BC, geology and science does tell us that land masses were much wider and more expansive before there were certain cataclysms in the earth. Glaciers melting, other factors perhaps caused sea levels to rise. So you can see in red here were former land masses. Southeast Asia, for example, used to be one much larger land mass connecting the islands we know today. Same thing with the islands to the north of Europe here. Britain and the islands to the north of Europe used to be connected to continental Europe, and there was a much wider and expansive landmass there. But as we look at some of the very earliest artifacts that we have record of from 30,000, 20,000, 25,000 BC, the first piece of sculpture is Woman of Willendorf, and of course this is featured in the book. Many experts feel this is a fertility goddess. The amplified female body parts are symbolic in referencing fertility, which was extremely important in colder climates and Stone Age culture, where childbirth and success in childbirth was very important to sustain the tribe or the family. You needed children to help contribute to doing the work, the hunting and gathering. So that's what many experts feel is the symbolic function behind artworks like this. Of course, more famous are the cave paintings. I would imagine most of you have seen things like this or are at least familiar with them. And again, dating back to 30,000, 20,000, 15,000 BC or so. These are all over, especially around Europe. And many feel that the animal drawings are very well done, especially for what we're told are primitive hunter-gatherers. The detail, the definition is extraordinary for ancient art of this nature. So what's also interesting is that you rarely ever see man depicting himself. This is one of the very rare depictions of man drawing a picture of himself. Most of the subject matter is centering around the buffalo and so on. And again, many experts feel that this is due to the fact that man survived by hunting these animals. This is what produced life and sustained life. Hunting the animals, this is what you survived on. And so many feel, too, that these depict, for example, this one, like a hunting ritual gone wrong, where the man has pierced the buffalo and now he's been charged. Many feel that there were hunting societies that gathered in these caves. If you could draw the animal, that would symbolically convey a mastery over it. Often, too, some of the other works you'll see hand markings or spear piercings in these cave paintings. Maybe the hunters were symbolically acting out a successful hunt in their mind beforehand, or teaching lessons of what could go wrong if you didn't do things correctly. So even Picasso has a very interesting quote when he was given access to the Lascaux cave paintings. He says, "We have learned nothing in 12,000 years," commenting and remarking on the fact that the three-dimensional definition, the precision, the correctness of the anatomy of these animals is quite well done, and that there was a very high and sophisticated level of artistic craftsmanship for these paintings, given the fact that we're told that these are primitive hunter-gatherers and so on. So, excuse me, other recent sites have been found, recently in Turkey that do give evidence to sophisticated societies that were able to build pretty sophisticated stone structures. And these are definitely dated 10,000 BC, 9,000 BC. Göbekli Tepe is one of the more interesting recent excavations and developments. In fact, only a fraction of this has been excavated. There's several more area and region around this site that they say there's a whole lot of stuff underground there that still can potentially be excavated, reflecting culture, going this back. And we've known about other ones in Turkey as well in the Near East. And again, a lot of things have caused mainstream science to look at the fact that civilization is possibly a lot more older and a lot more mysterious than what we thought. So just an interesting aspect to looking back on some of the very ancient prehistoric artworks and civilizations that we know of. And that brings us to a featured culture, which is ancient Samaria. The textbook gets at this, and this is a very interesting ancient culture in that they lay claim to many of the firsts that we define as civilization. Mesopotamia literally means the land between two rivers. So you can see that many ancient city-states started to grow up around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers here. And ancient Samaria lays claim to, again, like we said, several of the firsts. The first writing, the first mathematics, the first legal systems, the first education system, the first sophisticated civil engineering and town planning. So they're certainly worth looking at. When we talk about markings of high civilization, often people will say writing communication is certainly a key. I would also add to that agriculture probably has to come first. Many experts feel that agriculture is probably the biggest transformation in society from hunter-gatherers to where now agriculture can allow people to settle in one spot and grow a surplus of food and focus on other things. So systems of writing develop in early Samaria, and you can see they look pictograph style, where most of these early tablets and writings are used for more record keeping and accounting, but soon they would expand or develop into further uses. The writing would become much more abstract with line and shapes, and it would be applied to more things like religion, literature, societal laws, and so on. And you can see various examples of Sumerian art and read about these in the book here. Some would even say that Sumerians had a pretty sophisticated understanding of the solar system. Works like this are often controversial. There's a lot of very interesting things out there on the early Sumerian culture because of their sophistication and seeming, advanced understanding of writing, mathematics, and many other things, as we pointed out. Some would say that there's really not much here. This could be just any random star. Some say that the proportion of these planets matches pretty accurately the configuration of our modern solar system with the sun at the center. And as you know, most cultures did not think that the sun was the center of the solar system of the universe. But here, there's possibly some artworks that would seem to indicate that Sumerians possibly knew that or guessed right, or perhaps maybe that's just a star, and then some other random star system. The one thing that the book does focus on is this particular work, where you see the figures in prayer and the exaggerated eyes, which are the window to the soul. And that's reflected in a lot of ancient art. You'll see that in Egypt and in Greece as well, ancient Greece, this understanding that the eye is a very important and powerful communicator of the emotions, and like we have the phrase, window to the soul. The ancient Sumerians, later on, also in Babylon as well, you'll have nice, large, colossal structures, the ziggurats, of course. Another seemingly common thread between ancient Sumerian, Near Eastern, Egyptian, and early Greek art is the use of hybrids, combination subject matter that is part human, also with animal characteristics. You see this quite a bit in the Egyptian deities, the centaurs of Greece, obviously the Sphinx, the body of a lion and the head of a man. These seem to be common subject matter pieces in the ancient Mediterranean world. Of course, the Sphinx is one of the greatest and most spectacular sculptures of all time. Still, to this day, the largest monolithic sculpture. In other words, it's made of just carved of one block of stone. Of course, that's on the famous Giza site with the pyramids. And again, there seems to be some speculation that the ancient pyramids also contain some very advanced understanding of astronomy. Again, of course, some of the mainstream skeptics dispute this, but many would say the pyramids of Giza, as well as the ones around Mexico City and Teotihuacan and others, mirror or match Orion's belt, that there's some connection, or there's some reason symbolically why they match this brightest star in the sky, typically Orion and Orion's belt. Also, too, the pyramids have sophisticated understanding of due. They're aligned due north, south, east, and west. On the spring equinox, the sun rises right above the Sphinx's head, which is looking exactly due east. So there seemed to be evidence of certainly of a pretty good understanding of the solar calendar and other things with astronomy in these ancient sites. Again, pretty impressive for people that we're told are primitive hunter-gatherers and so on. Of course, in Egyptian art, this is one of the more famous drawings, and this is not in the textbook, but I wanted to include it because it shows that the Egyptian society had elites that could understand the more abstract language here, but you also communicated in pictograph or hieroglyphics. So this is the famous Last Judgment, and you can see the dead man's soul is being led through the underworld. His heart will be weighed against a feather, and if he led a good, clean, moral life, the heart would weigh less than the feather. Of course, that is the case here, and he will move into further realms of into the afterlife, and encounter higher deities within the underworld and the afterlife. And so it does reflect the belief that the Egyptians put a lot of thought and emphasis on understanding that your actions in this life matter, and that you will be judged, and there will be some consequences to your action, positive or perhaps negative. In fact, if the feather did not, in other words, if the heart weighed more than the feather, the person would have been devoured by this jackal-headed creature here. So the scales are showing the judgment and the potential of moving onward into the afterlife. So other things, too, we talk about Greek and Egyptian culture. As it was pointed out in the sculpture unit, the Greeks went to Egypt to study monumental stone carving. And you can see, obviously, a lot of similarities here with the Greek male having the left foot striding forward, basically patterned and copied off of the Egyptian male. Both are formal and stiff, being close to one block of stone. The Greeks, of course, will develop a much more nude and kind of free-flowing sculptural figure as time goes on, but they certainly borrowed originally from the Egyptians and modeled a lot of their early art off of the Egyptians. That's also the case here, as you can see, that the Egyptians created a standard way of drawing the human being, and that is with flat application of color, flat two-dimensional profile people. But the typical thing is the profile head with the frontal eye. Again, exaggerating or featuring that eye. And when you look at some of the early drawings or representations of the human figure in ancient Greece, again, the profile head and the frontal eye, giving prominence or emphasis to that eye being frontal with a flat two-dimensional representation of the human being as far as the general body and so on. So some interesting things that certainly evidence that early Greek culture borrowed, very heavily from the Egyptian model that was there before. To fill it out, you can look at the PowerPoint here. Some of the other early examples, the Solomon's Temple, which was rebuilt in the 6th century BC. Ancient India, in the northwestern part, had a very advanced civilization also. Very sophisticated town planning. Ancient China, awesome producer of early bronzes and potteries and things of this nature. We'll get more into some of the other cultures in the next video in Chapter 10. Thank you so much.